coming up on Union Square brings a lot of memories of my work with Critical Mass, trying to save it from the police crackdown back about 20 years ago. A lot of people don't know the story. It's not a story that's often told, but it had a huge impact on me, and it's the reason how I got involved in bike law as a profession. You know, at the time I was working at a corporate law firm, but I was a daily cyclist, and I was out riding with my son, and you know, there were people tabling at a solar energy event, I think over on the east side, and you know, they were trying to get people to sign up to stop something called the parade rules. So I was like, well, what are the parade rules? What is this about? And it turned out that the NYPD had proposed that any group of 10 or more cyclists proceeding together be treated and regulated as if it was a parade, which would mean that you would need to get prior approval from NYPD to ride together with a group of 9 other people and get NYPD approval of your route in advance, or you would be in violation of law. And you know, this just sounded preposterous to me and shocking, and why would we need this, and what's the danger of 10 people riding together? And that's how I found out about Critical Mass, because I had been riding for my whole life before then, but I really hadn't been a political rider, and I had not been a bike advocate. But what I learned through this time spent at the table being asked to sign the petition is that there was a community event for the bicycling community called Critical Mass. It happened on the last Friday of every month, which we happen to be here right now. And it was basically just get together in your city at a meeting place at 7 o'clock at night, and let's ride together without a fixed itinerary and just enjoy the streets as cyclists with the freedom and joy and the safety that comes with riding in a group, as opposed to riding alone, where you can be bullied by motorists, where motorists could say, oh, sorry, I didn't see you, and they hit you, and you know, all of that, right? And this movement of Critical Mass had grown to enormous proportions in New York City and had really grown the cycling movement and community here, unbeknownst to me as an everyday cyclist, because, you know, I just used it for transportation. But what I learned was that this movement got bigger and bigger. It was involving thousands of people in the warm weather. And in 2004, on the last Friday of the month in August, Critical Mass happened to coincide with opening night of the Republican National Convention in New York City. This was a huge deal because the Republican National Convention had never been in New York City, but Mayor Bloomberg, the Republican mayor of New York City, decided to invite them in to say, we can be hospitable to Republicans here in New York City too. But what Mayor Bloomberg didn't realize is that he had allowed, and his police had in fact actually facilitated the growth of Critical Mass. Before the famous Critical Mass ride on the last Friday in August 2004, the police would come out, the 1st Precinct Scooter Patrol, which typically spends its time, you know, escorting dignitaries around in motorcades around the city. The 1st Precinct Scooter Patrol was out, and they would cork intersections for Critical Mass. You know, the ride, it was hundreds or thousands of people, and in order to have it move efficiently through the city, the police on their scooters would stop traffic if it was a green light for that traffic intersecting the ride, to get the ride through in an efficient way so that it wouldn't be broken up, to minimize conflicts with motorists. And the fact is, it functioned safely. It was an amazing community event that just grew cycling enormously here in New York City. But then when it coincided with the Republican National Convention, which was an event that many New Yorkers, most of whom, you know, are aligned with the Democratic Party, found offensive, you know, we had enormous sweeping demonstrations going on all over the city by people on foot. But what we learned that night is that a bike-mounted demonstration has the ability to uniquely bedevil the NYPD. So basically, Critical Mass that night was about 6,000 to 8,000 cyclists strong, and it shut down the city. And Mayor Bloomberg took it as an embarrassment, And he said to his police commissioner at the time, Ray Kelly, "You are going to shut down this ride." And that's what they went about doing. And they tried many different tactics to shut down the ride, most of which were blatantly unconstitutional and abusive. And upon learning this, when I got the whole backstory after running into the petitioners, I decided I needed to get involved in this, and I convinced my employer at the time, corporate law firm, that this was an important constitutional issue that the law firm should be funding opposition to. And they agreed to, fund pro bono litigation against New York City for trying to limit bicyclists proceeding together without police permission to the number of 9. And we spent years litigating against NYPD and learned a whole lot about NYPD and cyclists, which I'll save for another video. But really it was an absolutely critical watershed litigation in terms of public space here in New York City. For whose benefit is it maintained, and what is the role of police in managing the public space and the various uses we have of transportation, of commerce, of First Amendment activity? Because all of those things go on in our public space, including our streets, and our streets need to be available for all of it. And how is the government going to manage the streets in a manner that harmonizes those different uses? Those were the very weighty and important questions, especially for New Yorkers, that were at issue in that litigation. And while the litigation failed in some ways, it also served to crystallize and galvanize a movement here in New York City to make the streets more bike friendly that I think is really an important next chapter and needs to be seen in the context of that earlier struggle.